Now, the first thing we're going to do is head into settings on the bottom right corner, depending where you are in your default. A lot of times when you boot up OBS for the first time, everything you see here may be in a different spot. Don't worry about that. Just find the settings button, click it. It'll take you to this screen right here, and that's where we're going to begin our OBS tutorial guide on the recording. So we're going to start all from scratch. In the general tab, you're going to have your English or your languages here. I have mine set to English. You can then go to theme. You can select any theme that you'd like. I had mine set to the default one. These two are unchecked beneath that. Moving down to the next section called updates, I do have mine set to stable. Now here's a box that if it's not unchecked, I would recommend that you do check it. It's called automatically check for updates on startup. Sometimes this does not work. If this doesn't work, I want you to, let me go ahead and exit this menu real quick. If it doesn't work where it doesn't update for you, I want you to click on help and then click on check for updates manually, and that's how you can update OBS in case the automatic feature doesn't work. Back in the settings menu, so that's the update section. Go down to output. I don't believe I had any of these checked by default, so you can go ahead and skip output. If any of this stuff resonates with you or you feel like you need it, go ahead and use it. For instance, we're talking about recordings here. You can say automatically record when streaming. If you want that option, go ahead and check it. And then it even says keep recording even when the stream stops. Moving down to source alignment snapping, I find this to be extremely helpful. This is for your preview window that you saw me disable earlier, where you can snap your windows into place. If you don't have that checked, you have to manually adjust and it won't have that nice snug snap. So in my opinion, I would leave this checked if it is. If it's not, give it a shot. If you don't like it, that's cool. Just uncheck it. Make sure you hit apply. Moving down to projectors, I don't use this at all, so I wouldn't feel comfortable even going over these features. I can't speak to it. So for me, I left all of this unchecked. If you like this or you use these, drop a comment, let everybody know, hey, for the projector section, this is how it functions. This is what I use, okay? Moving down to system tray, this is totally your choice. I have mine enabled. What that means is whenever you turn this on, you minimize it, you're gonna have the system tray option. I'm not recording the screen to show you right now because my main monitor is to my left, but it's basically in the system tray, bottom right corner where your time is, okay? Moving down to preview, you're gonna have hide overflow, overflow always visible, show overflow even when source is invisible, draw safe areas, and you have show pixel alignment guides. For me, I like the show pixel alignment guides. What that is you're exactly what it says. When you're moving things around in that preview window, it's gonna show the show pixel alignment guides for easier, kind of like a visual aid, if you will. Trust me, I think you're gonna wanna keep that on. Now, importers, this I used when I was transitioning over from Streamlabs OBS. Some folks call it slobs. If you're trying to migrate over from Streamlabs OBS over to OBS Studio, you're gonna wanna have this checked. That way you can export and import freely and get everything moved over comfortably. Studio mode, I've left this default. I gotta be honest with you, I always left this checked at the bottom where it says show preview program levels. I would recommend that you do the same, kind of keep it simple. Multi-view here at the bottom, I always left this at default. I never even touched this. If you're trying to follow what I'm doing here, leave it checked. If you don't like it, experiment with it unchecked, just make sure you hit the apply button on the right hand corner like I just did there. Okay, so next up is I'm gonna skip down to the audio tab. We're not streaming in this video. We're not gonna go over that. That's in another video. We're gonna go over the audio section first. I promise you, we're gonna circle back to the output and video. That's where the meat and potatoes, I know is what you're all here for. So we're gonna go to audio. Now, the one thing you're gonna notice that's different from mine compared to yours, I'm willing to bet, is the general section where my mouse is. It's gonna say sample rate. I'm willing to bet yours has 48 kilohertz, okay? I have mine set to 44.1 only because my operating system is set to 44.1, and I found that I was losing audio when both my operating system and this were not aligned. So if you're missing audio or you have some audio issues, my first recommendation is to come into the audio tab, move over to the general section at the top and adjust the sample rate. Okay, so try that first. I have another tip. If I remember to go over, actually, you know what? We can go over the tip here in a little bit because it is in this menu here. If you go down to global audio devices, you're probably wondering how in the heck do you have audio or a mic with all of these disabled? That's another OBS video that I will be making sometime soon. I don't know when, so be sure to subscribe and don't miss that video. But this is more of an advanced setting of what I've done. But for basic use, you're gonna drop down the desktop audio and select your speakers or whatever your audio is for your desktop. Move down to the mic auxiliary audio and then drop that down and select the microphone that you're using. That's for your basic setup. The meter section, I don't use this. I gotta be honest with you, I don't even know what this is. I'm not gonna speak to it because I'm not gonna pretend like I know what all this is. I don't know. So I left this on default. Now here is, do you remember me earlier saying if you're missing audio, there's another section you can check. Here it is. This is the advanced section under the audio tab. If you are missing audio, I'm willing to bet that you have it set to default and you probably didn't even do that. Sometimes OBS or even Windows or whatever OS you're using just decides to select default on monitoring device and you probably didn't do it. If you're missing audio, come in here, drop it down and select your speakers or your audio output. I'm willing to bet that'll get you your audio back. That happened to me 2 weeks ago. I came in here, selected the speakers, and what do you know? I got my audio back. The disable Windows audio ducking, I would leave this checked. What this does is it does exactly what it says. It's ducking. So it kind of ducks and bobs and weaves in between your audio depending on certain levels. Think of like normalizing audio. You know how it kind of goes like that to keep that normalized? This is what audio ducking is. So I would keep this checked. I think it's checked by default. I don't have any hotkeys enable, so I'm not going to go over the bottom section. Let's move on to video. In the video section, I'm obviously using the tool right now, so I can't drop this down, but I will go over what all of this means. Now, if you're on whatever monitor you're using, what resolution you're using is your base canvas resolution. The monitor I'm using now is a 38-inch LG ultra wide, and the resolution just so happens to be 3840 by 1600. You may have a different resolution. Whatever your resolution is your base canvas. My recommendation, select your resolution that your monitor is running at, the recommended resolution, run it there. Now, the next section here, this is optional. And I'm gonna say optional because when you're recording, not streaming, if you're streaming, I would say do an output scaled resolution and scale it down. Okay, that's just my recommendation and my opinion. But when it comes to recording, if you want to have the clearest image, I would recommend that you match your output scaling resolution to your base resolution. Match those, keep them together. And then when you do that, the downscale filter no longer applies because you're not downscaling anything. Now you're matching the res. If you're gonna be recording whatever content you're creating or whatever you're doing, I would recommend that you keep it the same. If your system is struggling, if your system doesn't have the right specs to keep up with the matched resolution on what you're trying to present to your viewers or whoever your audience is, go ahead and use the output scaled resolution. Drop it down to the next option or 2 or 3. And I would recommend that when you use downscale filter, use the 36 scaled option called Lanczos filtering, okay? Use that. If your system is still struggling after 36 samples, go ahead and bump it or lower it to, I believe it's 16 by cubic, okay? And just keep going down the list until you see a smoother experience. There are other ways to keep your encoder from overloading. I'm gonna show you here in just a second in case you're getting encoding overload. I'll talk to you about that, okay? Now, when it comes to common FPS values, my recommendation is just leave it at 60 frames per second unless you're purposely putting out content that you feel would look better in 30 or 24 or whatever it is that you're doing. Drop this down and select the frames per second. But if you want silky smooth YouTube videos, etc., keep it on 60. Make sure you hit apply. Moving on to the next part of this tutorial guide, you're going to go ahead and click on output. There is a lot to go over here, so feel free to pause the video, match my settings. You do not have to use every single thing that I go over. Use this as a baseline and a template and then go from there. That's my best advice to you if you're watching any tutorial guide on YouTube. Use it as a baseline and adjust to your settings, your system, your environment, okay? All right, cool. Now, we're not streaming, right? This is a video about recording. So you're gonna click on the recording tab. In here, you're gonna have 2 options. You're gonna have standard and I think you're gonna have advanced. And I really wish I would have used my other computer now that I'm doing this, that I can show you what the drop downs are so I can show you what these look like. But I hit record, these are grayed out. I'm gonna go off of memory the best I can. Go ahead and make sure that this is selected standard so that you can access these options here. I believe the other one may be called simple and standard. It used to be called advanced, so someone correct me if I'm wrong. For recording settings, I would recommend that you go ahead and set a recording path first. Make sure you click on browse and then find either a secondary or third drive that you're using or your primary drive. Create a folder and have a dedicated folder and or drive or both where your recordings will go to. Moving on to a very popular question is recording format. Should I use MP4? Should I use MKV? And I'm gonna go over why I use both. In a video like this, I use MP4. The reason being is because it's one less step to get it into my editing tool. I use Premiere Pro. I don't know if DaVinci Resolve or any other program supports .mkv. If you guys are using that software, please let us know in the comments that if that software uses .mkv. So if you're using Adobe Premiere Pro, it does not support .mkv. You actually have to do a step called remuxing. Okay, let me go back to MP4. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm already doing that. MP4 is the de facto, I guess, format for all editing software. It works on everything. All right. Now, here is the downside to MP4. It happened to me and it happened to a few others that I know of. If you're using MP4 and you're recording, let's say a long whatever session you're doing, whatever content, and let's say OBS crashes, well, guess what? You just lost all of your footage. Every single bit. You can't salvage it. It's done. So using MP4 is a big gamble. And the only reason I'm using MP4 now is because these videos like this, these short tutorial videos, I feel comfortable in doing MP4. It's one less step for me to do MKV and remuxing, and I'll go over that here in a second. So I just keep it MP4 and I roll with the punches and I go to the next step. If you're afraid that you're going to lose your footage and you're doing a long recording session of like 45 minutes, an hour, 5 hours, 6, whatever, use mkv.mkv, okay? So when you use that format, when you're done recording, you are going to obviously back out of the settings menu. You're going to click on File, okay? And you're going to go down to the second option called Remux Recordings. It's going to bring up another window, okay? It's going to say OBS Recording here and your target file here. It looks confusing and intimidating because most of you have never seen this before. That's okay. What you're gonna do is click on the triple dot right here, and once you do this, I have a folder already named Remux Footage to keep it simple, and you're gonna find the Remux footage. I have none right now, but you're gonna double click that file. Okay, it's going to show up in the OBS recording, simple as that. Your next step after that is to click on the Remux button. Depending how large the file is, it's going to convert it from .mkv to .mp4. Okay, now here is the downside to that process. It's going to double in size of how much space it takes up on your drive. Here's an example. Let's say you did a 2-hour recording in 4K, right? That's probably going to be, depending on how much gay PBS you used, anywhere from 10 gigs to 30 gigs or possibly 50 gigs. That's just your MKV file. So guess what? When you remux, now it's going to be double that because now you have 2 files. So if you're in the middle of remuxing and let's say you don't have enough drive space because you forgot, well, guess what? It won't remux because it'll keep giving you an error saying not enough drive space. So when you remux, just know whatever size your file is, it's going to be doubled because now you're going to have MKV and MP4. But the good news is this, the benefit of MKV is if your OBS crashes or something happens, something goes south or awry, your MKV will be kept intact up to the point the OBS software crashed or up to the point where you lost that footage. It keeps everything that you've done up until that point, which is fantastic. Think of it as insurance, right? It's insurance. And you never know if that insurance is going to pan out well until you got to use it. That's MKV. Okay. All right. Let's get back into the settings. Here we are back in the settings, in the recording settings at the very top, that is. Now, if you notice where it says audio track, now I have 1 unchecked and 2 and 3 checked and the others unchecked. Why do I have that? I'll tell you why. Track 2 is going to be my microphone track. Track 3 is my desktop audio or my source audio, okay? I'll give an example. Let's say I'm recording a review for a game. Track 2 is my microphone track, so I can adjust the volume separately in post. Track 3 is the game audio or whatever, or music or whatever, and I can adjust the volume of that, okay? So you don't have to select 2 and 3. You can select 5 and 6 if you want to, or 4 and 5. The point being is it's really getting the good habit of separating your tracks for your recordings. You're going to want to do this. Now you may ask, why do you have 2 and 3 checked? Why not 1, 2? I'll tell you why. Because I stream and record. Track 1 is dedicated for my streaming track. Okay, so all my streams are handled through track 1. My recording tracks are handled through track 2 and 3. They're separated. That's why. So if you're not a streamer and you do nothing but recordings, just do 1 and 2 and then leave the rest blank. So entirely up to you. But if there's any tip or trick you're going to get out of this section is make sure you separate both tracks, your microphone volume and your desktop audio. Next up is the encoder. Now you have choices in here. I happen to use my NVIDIA NVENC, which stands for NVIDIA Encoder H.264. This is using my graphics card, my GPU encoder chip to encode this very video that you're watching now. However, if you're recording a video on a different PC and you don't want to use your GPU, you can use your processor, okay, as the encoder, and that's going to be your H.264, and then you're going to have different presets you can adjust to for the encoding type, okay? So my opinion, if you have a graphics card that is capable of encoding, I would recommend that you use that. This is a 30 series graphics card that I'm using to encode here. Never had any problems. In fact, there's times where I feel like the encoder on the GPU is actually slightly better than what the processor is capable of doing. That's just my opinion. You guys may have different outcomes with your experiments. So my recommendation, use your graphics card encoder if you have one. The rescale output, I never touch this. I always leave it unchecked, which it should be by default. I don't ever use this because you've done all that work in the videos tab. You did all the output scaling or rescaling, the base canvas. Remember that? That's all done there. You don't want to do that. This is almost like double dipping and that you just don't need to do. You get what I'm saying? Custom muxer settings. I don't touch this. I don't ever use this feature. So for the sake of this video, we're going to skip this area here. Same thing for automatic file splitting. I leave this unchecked. This was left by default. I don't use these features. I won't cover it here in the video. I can't speak to it. Okay, so we're going to move on. Moving down to the encoder settings. Now you have options here with the rate control. Okay, I have tried CBR and I've also tried lossless and I've tried CQP. I don't think I've ever tried VBR if I'm not mistaken. There was a time where I used CQP. CQP is really good. It's actually a fantastic quality. It really, really is. But it's more stressful on your system. Okay, I stuck with the tried and true CBR. If you don't know what that stands for constant bit rate. Now, because we're in a recording session, we can talk about what bit rate can you use. And there's a lot of controversy out there amongst a lot of the YouTube creators, folks in the comment sections, and I want to talk to you about the bit rate of a recording. There's going to be the recommended settings, and then there's going to be settings that you can use to tailor towards how much hard drive space or solid state drive space you have on your system, because it will vary, especially the resolution that you're using. So check this out. The video that you're watching right now is in 4K according to YouTube. I'm recording in 3840 by 1600, which is not a 4K resolution or Ultra HD. It's just south of that. But YouTube picks it up as a 4K resolution. Now, if you notice my bitrate, that's a pretty low 25,000. You're going to hear a lot of YouTubers out there, including myself, you're going to want to put it on 50,000, 50K kbps for 4K footage. But for me, I am doing content like this where it's a strategy guide or a guide tutorial, and I found that 25,000 kbps is more than enough for the resolution to look good. The quality of the recording looks fine in my opinion, and by the time you upload to YouTube, with all the YouTube compression and processing it does, you're going to lose that 50K anyway. For me, I would recommend that you start with 25,000 just to save some space on your storage drive, because if you bump it up to 50, you're going to be taking up a lot of space on your drive. Trust me, I've done that before. To me, it wasn't worth it. Now, however, if you use 25,000 kbps and you feel like, man, this quality, it's not great, this is not what I want something higher, awesome. You need to go ahead and bump that up to 50, bump it up to 50,000, and then see if your quality is to your standards, okay? But for me, I'm trying to find that balance of quality versus saving space. So I chose 25,000. Again, this is entirely up to you. This is your choice. Use this as a guide and go from there, okay? I hope that helps with that piece, because that's a hot topic. Moving down to keyframe intervals. Now, if you notice, it says 0 equals auto, which is fantastic, right? By default, it's gonna say 0, right? For me, I get the warm fuzzies knowing that it's going to be 2 seconds. All right. I want to remove the automation and I want full control of this software. and I'm going to tell the software keyframe interval, please do 2 seconds. Okay. So I went ahead and put in 2 seconds. I recommend that you do the same, but if not, no sweat, leave it at 0, should be fine. Now, check this out. This is another hot topic. In V28 OBS and V29, and most likely going forward, they introduced these settings here, which drastically improve the visual fidelity of both streaming and recordings. I love these settings, but I want to go over them very similarly how I went over it in my streaming OBS guide. We're going to stop and talk about this, the presets. Okay. Now, if you're using your GPU encoder, not your processor, your GPU encoder will give you these options. If you're using a processor as your encoder, you'll have different options here. For the sake of this video, we're going to be discussing the GPU encoder presets. Now, what on earth is all of this? What do you need to use? I'm going to tell you what I've done, what issues I ran into, and what I landed on. Before I get into this, we are using P4. You are watching P4 medium quality right now. You be the judge. What does it look like to you? Does it look good? Thumbs up, thumbs down? What do you think, right? Seriously, let me know in the comments. I'm very curious because you are watching P4. But let's talk about this. P7 will be the absolute best quality. All right, it looks outstanding. It's pretty much like a lossless quality. It looks amazing. However, you're going to need a NASA machine, and not even NASA can run this. I'm kidding. But the point is P7 is going to take up a lot of system resources, and you're going to have encoding overload. I'm almost willing to bet you're going to have encoding overload. So my recommendation, at least in 2023, I would not use P7. Try it out though. Give it a shot. See how it works. If it works out, hey, awesome. Good for you. It didn't work for me. P6, it says slower, better quality. P6 can work, but if you are recording in 4K, you will have encoding overload about 2 to 5 minutes in. You're going to have a message at the bottom of the OBS software, bottom left corner. It's going to say encoding overload. Please lower your presets, adjust your presets because this ain't working. You know what I mean? So you're going to have really choppy frames in your recording, like a big PowerPoint slideshow. That's what it's going to look like. Okay. I've tried this so many times, and it seems like when I'm using 4K resolution and in some cases even 1440p, 2K, the encoding overload hits when I'm using P6. At 1080p, I have not tested 1080p or 720p, so I don't know. But just know, the higher the resolution at P6, you're going to have some encoding overload issues, and your frames in your recording will slow down to a crawl. Best to avoid P6. Now, P5. P5 has worked for me about half of the time. When I am recording in 4K, or the resolution I'm at now, about 5 to 10 minutes in, I started to get encoding overload. It does work in the beginning, but all of a sudden, it's like, man, I cannot keep up with this. I just can't do it. I get the message, and all of a sudden, my recordings become chopped. Now, when I do 1440p, or I can't speak to 1080p. I'm assuming it's going to work, but 1440p P5 is fine. It does work. So if you're on a 1440p or a 2K screen, try out P5. Okay, but if you start getting encoding overload, you're going to have to go to P4, P3, P2, P1. But P4 will probably be your best bet. Speaking of which, you're watching P4 like now, like I mentioned earlier. This is P4. All right. I've had no issues with P4 ever. I never tried P3, P2, and P1 because I found that P4 was perfect for me with the medium quality. Don't let the word medium fool you. Yes, it's medium, but it looks outstanding. I think you should go with P4. Start with P5. Start with P5. If you get encoding overload and you're getting a choppy recording, go ahead and stop it, delete the file, bump it up to P4, go from there, see how it goes. Okay. Next up is tuning. My recommendation right out of the gate, put it on high quality, especially for recording. There's really no need for you to put it on low latency or ultra low latency for recordings. You can for streams, but I'll be honest with you, when you put it on low latency and ultra low latency, you're going to have smearing, smudging, blur when it's movement going on, especially if you're filming or recording anything with like blades of grass. It's going to look like Tetris and things like that. I would recommend that you keep your tuning to high quality. Here's another one that people get really confused about that I'm happy to go over here in this video. I went over it in the streaming video as well. Multi-pass mode. What on earth are these three options? What does it mean, and what should you choose? Let's start with single pass. If you don't know what this means, single pass means that when your encoding is processing, right? Like right now. So what it's doing is it's going through a single pass. Okay, pretend this is your footage and this is the encoder. The encoder will go single pass and that's it. 2 pass full resolution will do 1, 2, right? at the full maximum resolution before it outputs it to your recording file. Okay, 2-pass quarter resolution is exactly what it says. 2 passes at the quarter reduced resolution. Don't let that quarter resolution fool you. What you're really wanting here is you want 2 passes. Think of it as you're sweeping your home with a broom and you went over it through 1 pass. And if you go over it again, guess what's going to happen? Your floors will probably be extra clean because you went over it again instead of a single pass. From a performance stance, I will tell you that when I've used single pass, I have noticed these small micro stutters. They're very small, but someone like ourselves, especially content creators and gamers too, we will notice those hitches. We will notice those little stutters and they get really annoying. In my opinion, I would avoid single pass. Now, 2-pass full resolution, give it a shot. I'm willing to bet you're going to get encoding overload, especially at 4K resolution, because this is a lot to deal with, especially 4K twice. I would avoid that if I were you. Try it out though. If it works for you, awesome. You'll get a better quality, okay? I have always landed on 2 passes, quarter resolution. Got to be honest with you, I really don't see a difference unless there's some side-by-side comparison video. I never see anything. Again, what you're watching now is P4 for the preset, high quality for the tuning, and you're watching 2-pass quarter resolution right now in this video for multi-pass mode. Those are my recommendations. When it comes to profile, you have 3 options. You have high, main, baseline. Start with high. If you don't know what this means, just think of this as your settings for your overall computing power, right? How do you want OBS to utilize your computer holistically? So high means exactly that. Think of a settings like high, medium, low. That's exactly what this is. So you want your profile here to be set to high so that your system is being fully utilized for that high profile. Main means medium. M for main, M for medium. Think of it that way. So you have high, main, medium. Baseline is the floor. Think of the floor as low. So in case you're trying to remember what these mean, baseline low, main is medium, high is high. Simple enough. Leave it on high for your profile, okay? Next up is another section called Look Ahead and Cycle Visual Tuning. I'm going to go over these and why I have Look Ahead unchecked and why do I have Psycho Visual Tuning checked. Let's talk about this. So let's start with Psycho Visual Tuning. I have this checked. Now, if you don't know, this is what it says. You hover your mouse over the question mark there and it says this: enables encoder settings that optimize the use of bitrate for increased perceived visual quality, especially in situations with high motion. And then it goes on by saying at the cost of increased GPU utilization. Okay, don't let that scare you when it says increased GPU utilization. Don't worry about that. What it's saying here is when you have high motion, it's gonna kind of make things look a lot better, a lot more optimized. You're gonna want Psycho Visual Tuning checked. Okay, my recommendation. Now, this one here, some folks think you need to check this, some think you need to uncheck it. I left mine unchecked, and I'll tell you why. If you don't know what Look Ahead does, this is what it says when you hover your mouse over the question mark. It says this: Look Ahead enables dynamic B-frames. If disabled, which is what we have here in my example, it's unchecked. The encoder will always use the number of B-frames specified in the max B-frame settings below. And if you notice, I have mine set to 2 max B-frames. Now, you can set this to 3 and or 4 if you choose to do so. I would recommend that you go with 2, and I'll tell you why. If you set the max B-frames to 4 and you're doing high motion recordings of whatever you're doing, gaming, if the camera moves and pans too quickly, you're going to have a lot of smearing and smudge, especially scenes with grass or something with fine detail. It's going to look very pixely and a big mess. I would stay away from 4. Now, you can do 3. 3 is a very good blend of speed and quality. You can do 3, try it out. I've done 3. I actually did like 3, but I landed on 2 because I felt like things were processed a lot quicker and they didn't look as smudged or smeared, which is why a lot of content creators, including myself, recommends that you guys use max B-frames 2 with Look Ahead unchecked. Now, I'm not done with Look Ahead. If you hover your mouse over this, what does the rest of this say? Now, it says if you enable this box, if you check it, it will increase visual quality by only using however many B-frames are necessary, up to the maximum at the cost of increased GPU utilization. What does that even mean? I'll tell you. When you check this box, it's going to automate Look Ahead. It's going to automate your max B-frames. okay, up to the maximum. For me, I want full control of the software. I don't want it to automate anything. I want to know for sure that when I'm using the max B frames, I want it to be 2 at all times, no matter what's going on in the scene, composition, whatever. I want it to be 2. So my recommendation, uncheck look ahead. Make sure your max B frames is set to 2. When you're done here, make sure that you hit apply and that it's applied to everything we just went over. We're not finished. Move over to audio. In my streaming OBS guide, I talked about these tracks. Why do I have 160 on track 1 versus 320 on the rest? Now, for track 1, I stream exclusively here on YouTube. YouTube maxes their bit rate to 160. I would recommend that you do the same. Just keep whatever track that you're recording on, because your tracks may be different than mine. Just keep it at 320. Make sure you hit apply. I don't use the replay buffer at all, not even for streaming nor recordings. We're going to skip replay buffer. Moving on to hotkeys. You know, I do have some hotkeys set here, but I have a Stream Deck now and I don't use these anymore. So if you do not have a Stream Deck and you're trying to find out hotkeys to use, highly recommend that you hop in here to hotkeys and set whatever key you want to do pretty much anything. I mean, look at all these settings. Everything is customizable in OBS. It is awesome. Moving down to accessibility. This feature here allows you to set your source border colors, your border with your cropping, source border while you hover, mixer volume band. You can customize all the colors that you want, right? You see off to the right now where my microphone is going up and down, you can change all of these colors. Okay, so just know that it is customizable in OBS for you to do that. Moving down to advanced. Now let's talk about the general section at the top where I have above normal. Now in my streaming video, I talked about leaving this at normal. Now, because I have a 2 PC setup, I have been using above normal. I have seen more CPU utilization when you set this to above normal. It hasn't really harmed anything, but I want to go over these things because I would recommend that you avoid idle for obvious reasons. I would not use high. Some people say, yeah, I use high, things are fine. I think high is a little overkill in my opinion. It's going to put a lot of stress on your CPU, especially if you're trying to keep your CPU for a long extended period of time. If you keep this on high, you're going to be using your CPU constantly and it may reduce the life of your CPU. Keep that aware, okay, or be cognizant of that. Below normal, I would not recommend doing below normal either. I actually tried it out as a test just to kind of see what would happen. You're going to get a slideshow of performance. It doesn't quite do the job. So in fact, I don't even know why these two options are here. I mean, maybe some people just want to keep it there to keep it idle while the software is not being used. I'm sure there's a use case for it. I haven't found one. My recommendation is use normal to begin with. If you feel like you need more performance, bump it up to above normal. I wouldn't choose anything outside these two, okay? So start with that, all right? Moving down to the video section, obviously this is grayed out because I am using the tool, but I'll be honest with you, I don't touch this. All of this is default with Direct 3D 11 renderer. Color format is NV12. You can change the color format should you choose to do so. Your color space, I've always used Rec 709. Most of us do. There are other options under color space, like for HDR 2100 settings are in here. You can set your SDR white levels here, and then you can set your HDR nominal peak level nits here should you choose to do that. Color range, I've always left limited. I've tried full, and I found that when I try full color range, the colors are washed out. So I would leave it on limited or toggle between the two to see if there's a difference for your colors, but I left mine limited. Now, when it comes to recording section here, I never touch this. I never have touched this. Everything seems to work beautifully, leaving this at default, so I'm not going to even go over this. We aren't streaming. I'm going to skip stream delay. Again, automatically reconnect. We're going to skip this section as well as network sources. Now, if you're trying to free up resources on your system, uncheck unenable browser source hardware acceleration. If you don't know what this does, it uses your GPU for hardware acceleration. If you have anything that's using inside, like a web browser, for instance, uses hardware acceleration. If you're finding you're trying to squeeze out every ounce of performance, uncheck this. Now, be aware that when you uncheck this and you hit apply, it's going to prompt you need to restart OBS when you uncheck that. I left it unchecked because I don't use the browser source hardware acceleration, so I want to squeeze out as much GPU power as possible. So that's what I've done. That's my recommendation. So if you like this video and if it was helpful, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, catch future OBS guides from me. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.